Republican Congressman Brandon Gill of Flower Mound, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
So as you know, on this day, President Trump is going to be signing an executive order to prepare the U.S. Department of Education to wind down and return authority over education policy back to the states. Your thoughts?
Well, I think first of all, the educational authority should be at the state level. I think that it was a dubious constitutionality that the Department of Education was created to begin with. As you know, it was created not until 1979 under President Carter, and since then we have seen no improvement in educational attainment. In fact, on almost every single educational level, we've seen a decline in American standards. So it has not done its job. It has done an incredibly poor job. And a lot of the funding that comes from the Department of Education comes with strings attached, comes with woke ideologies that are being shoved down parents' throats, students' throats, and the state's throats. And I'm excited to see it end.
Now, there have been some concerns expressed by Democrats. The three Democrats who are in North Texas, Congresswoman Crockett, Julie Johnson, and Mark Vesey, sent a letter to Secretary McMahon questioning this and also expressing concern about the Office of Civil Rights being shut down or ultimately being shut down by the department, the Office of Civil Rights in Dallas. What do you say to that?
I would say, first of all, we don't have the text of the executive order just yet. I think we'll get that later today. Typically what happens whenever departments are being shut down like this is that some of the more useful functions are going to be dealt with elsewhere in other areas of the federal government. But by and large, I do not believe that the federal government should play a role to the extent that the Department of Education has in our educational system. That is a state role, and that's something the state should take up, and they will. And we've seen how successful they've been. You know, there's been a big movement in Texas, for instance, under Governor Abbott to push school choice. I think that we'll see that hopefully in this next legislative session on the state level, and I think that that shows a lot of promise.
And just to basically respond to what you said, as far as civil rights protections, you're saying that is a function that could be basically carried out by perhaps the U.S. Justice Department, but there's also been concerns about Pell Grants, grants for special education, that kind of thing. So you're saying those should still be picked up by other departments?
I'm saying some of them most likely will be picked up by other departments. I will say that there is a problem with our student loan system where the federal government is subsidizing student loans that are going towards woke educational degrees. That's wrong. I do not believe that our working class, our plumbers and electricians, should be subsidizing somebody else getting a gender studies degree, for instance. That needs to end.
Last question on the education front, and that is, this is still going to require action by Congress, right? This is not something that the president can just do himself. If that's so, how is this going to get past the Senate, which is going to require 60 votes?
Well, some of this can be done, I believe, via the reconciliation process, particularly regarding some of the student loan bailouts that Joe Biden forced. So I think we'll be able to do that with only 50 votes in the Senate, actually.
Not all the functions, but not shutting down the department completely.
Perhaps not every function, but a lot of that can be done via reconciliation.
So I also want to ask you about the articles of impeachment that you filed this week against Judge James Boasberg. Why did you do that?
Judge James Boasberg, a rogue D.C. Circuit Court judge, has abused his power of the judiciary, weaponized the judiciary, politicized it to usurp President Trump's clear plenary Article 2 powers of Commander-in-Chief. And remember, he did this for the purpose of turning a plane midair full of some of the most violent, brutal, ruthless terrorists to demand that they come back into our communities. That is a usurpation of power. It's unconstitutional and it's wrong.
What did you make of the Chief Justice saying that impeaching a judge is basically not the answer? There is the appellate process. Appeal the case. Appeal the judge's order. What do you say to that?
Well, I would love to see this ruling appealed, but I'd love to see this appealed quickly. The American people gave President Trump a mandate to both secure the border and deport illegal aliens. Remember, Tren de Aragua is one of the most grotesque drug organizations in the entire world. These are people that not only murder and rape little girls in America, but they derive sadistic pleasure from torturing their victims. These are the people that judge demanded come back into our communities. Now, we need the appellate process to work, but we need it to work quickly. This cannot be a months-long or years-long process. I hope that the Supreme Court steps in quickly, but a core part of our separation of powers and checks and balances is the power of Congress to impeach rogue judges, and this certainly qualifies as a case that demands impeachment.
As you know, there's a lot of discussion in Washington right now over these articles of impeachment that you filed. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, are you going to push for a vote? Are you going to force it? Because there are other legislative remedies being discussed.
There are several other legislative remedies, to your point, being discussed. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. We will be in the middle of all of those discussions. I think impeachment is a proper response here. I hope that we push it forward. I think that it would be best done by going through the proper committee process. So we'll see where that goes. But there are other remedies that Congress has as well. We can restructure the D.C. Circuit Courts. We can defund some of the D.C. courts. We can limit their jurisdiction. The idea that a single judge on the D.C. Circuit Court can determine national foreign policy, can tell a plane under the executive's authority to turn around full of domestic terrorists, foreign alien terrorists, and bring them back into our communities is wrong. It's a flagrant usurpation of the executive's authority, of his Article II constitutional authority and his statutory authority under the Enemy Aliens Act.
And so, just to be clear, you still think and you still want the impeachment articles to go forward?
I do. I would like to see them move forward.
And will you force a vote?
Listen, I think that the best way to do this is to go through the committee process. I think that may take a little bit of time. We'll have hearings on it. We'll have a lot of discussions on the proper ways, but I think that is going to be the most productive way for us to move forward.
The last question, and that is just, what do you say to those who say, the judiciary is a co-equal branch, checks and balances with the executive, the legislative branch? What do you say to that?
I'd say that what they're arguing for is not separation of powers or checks and balances. They're arguing for judicial supremacy. A core part of checks and balances is the legislature putting a check on a rogue judiciary. That is precisely what we are doing here. And if they want to explain to the American people why a single solitary circuit court judge should be able to determine the foreign policy of the United States and force the president to bring a plane full of enemy aliens, terrorists, into our country, they're welcome to explain that to the American people. But let me also make one other point here, which is that the president ran on this. This was a core part of the mandate that voters gave him. And if rogue judges can usurp the president's authority to completely alter his foreign policy and his core Article II powers to repel invaders, to repel people who have no business to being in this country to begin with, the courts are essentially rendering our elections null and void. They're usurping power, they're taking it away from the people, and they are placing it upon themselves. That is flagrantly unconstitutional.
Congressman Brandon Gill, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.